Next, we have a few words from the founder of this club, Ragav Sachdeva. He's come all this way from Oxford to tell you guys about competitive programming and give you a few words of wisdom.
Hello, this is categorically not true. I was just visiting family. I just happened to be here, happened to get invited, and I wasn't quite sure what to talk about, so I just made the slides yesterday, so we'll see how we go. Okay, so for most people, for most intensive purposes, I'm just a guy who's going to keep you entertained until pizza gets here, okay? I have nothing to do with the league, as in terms of like, I don't want to take credit for any of it. These guys put in all the hard work. So just bear with me, okay? We'll see, we'll roll with it. And not to say that I have everything figured out in my life, I'm still kind of figuring things out. So it's almost like conversation and discussion, things that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And you guys can, if it's something resonates, you can take on board. Otherwise, you can come up to me afterwards and be like, you're wrong there. Right, so life advice from someone who still uses a student discount, which is categorically true. I'm still a student, I still have my 15% discount for all things. But I was at this university from 2017 to 2021. So obviously not my lifespan, basically the time I was at Adelaide. Obviously you weren't here when I was here, so we'll just pretend that you all care about my life. I'll try to hook you in, show you some old photos, and get you guys invested in my life. And then maybe we'll go on to sharing some of my internal thoughts that I've been having lately. So we started easy, 2017. I went on to do an internship at Google at the end of the year, and I can talk a little bit more about the process later on if anyone's interested. Basically, it was 3 months of playing Smash. That's all we did. I think that's what that brings us to 2019. More pub crawls, right? More events. I think this is a competition that Microsoft, at the time Microsoft used to sponsor the club, so they came around, they did a competition. I won an Xbox. I sold the Xbox to buy a Switch immediately, but don't tell anyone, don't tell Microsoft. Then I did go to Microsoft to do an internship, took a semester off to do an internship at Microsoft. That was great, and that was kind of eye-opening at that time, but because before that, when I was at Google, I was like, this is great. This is what my life is going to be. I'm going to graduate, get a job here. This is summer camp experience. I get to play Smash every day. This is great. Going to Microsoft was an eye-opening experience, kind of. It was basically that I was doing work that I wasn't really interested in doing, so I was doing like low-level assembly level work. I was writing assembly for an internship, can you imagine? And then I was really trying to do or get myself or talk my way into coming back as a returning intern or full-time onto a team that's doing something more exciting, maybe something working on HoloLens. So I went to the building 99, which is the research building, and I tried talking to them, and they basically said, do you see those two doors? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, choose anyone to get out. So no one wants to give like an undergrad student the time of the day in like the research building over there, right? Because you like to pretend that you're good and you're good at what you do, but you like to pretend you're good at what you do, or you can fake your way through it, but they can tell, they can always tell. So they weren't really having me. So that's when I decided, you know what? Maybe I don't want to be like someone who's like a blank slate that they can fit me or pigeonhole me into something that they want to do. So that's when I started thinking about our second, like quite double guessing whether I do want to do software engineering or whether I want to pursue that, right? I came back, did another internship at Google, because it was summer holidays, so I took a gap semester to do that. Played some more Smash, but I think at that time I kind of decided that, you know what, I don't want to be making buttons, so I'll take a little bit more time to figure things out, but I don't want to get a job right away. I don't need to be 21, 22 making money. That's what my mindset was at the time. Then I graduated, so this is around June, July 2021, and after that I went on and started a PhD at Oxford. So beyond that, right, so now that we've all bonded, I thought hard about, I have nothing to do with competitive programming league, what do I come and talk about? I thought, oh, maybe I could give you life advice, but then again, I have not really lived, the only thing I know is how to be a student, right? I haven't done anything beyond that. So I was like, okay, well, you guys are students, so what value could I have? So I thought maybe it could be conversation, maybe it could be like, I'll tell you what I think about. I am a student, admittedly, but I'm also, from most of you, like compared to most of you, I'm like a very senior student, right? So I've been a student for like 9 years now at university, crazy. So maybe I'll just talk a little bit about what you could do in life and how to get there, and then we'll see how that comes along. So what to do in life? And we'll come back to this actually. We'll come back to how do you decide what you want to do in life. Not that I have figured it out, but I have some thoughts. And this is based on conversations with a lot of people. How do I get there is an interesting question, right? Let's talk about how do you get there. And because a lot of you are doing computer science, there for you means one of these four things, right? You can either get a job at big tech, fintech, startup, anywhere. You could go into research, which I thought I was going to do. I'm kind of still doing it, so that's another pathway. You could do your own company, start your own company, do your own startup, so you could do entrepreneurship, or you could do something completely different, go on a tangent, take 180, and decide, you know what, computer science is not for you, or do something else, and I can't speak for that, right? So let's just talk over some of these possibilities and how you could get there. Right, so getting a job at big tech, right? If you want to get a job at big tech or fintech or one of these places, I mean, every company has their own hiring process. They get to decide kind of how they want to, what are the things they're looking for, and it keeps changing over years. But there are a few common patterns that I've observed, and I've interviewed a bunch over the course of undergrad, so I can just share, I can talk about that. I mean, you guys will form your own opinions when you start interviewing. But generally, these interviews are driven by algorithms and data structures, right? And a very, very good way to practice for them is through competitive programming. I mean, competitive programming is going to expose you to problems that are much, much, much harder than anything you're likely to experience in an interview. And if you do experience anything harder than what you've experienced in competitive programming, I think you should give up on that interview because they're being mean to you. So basically, do a bunch of competitive programming. Nothing really prepares you for it more than, nothing prepares you for interviews more than competitive programming. Has anyone here heard of lead code? Has anyone not heard of lead code? Yeah? It's not a single person. So I don't need to, okay, I'll go through it anyway. So lead code is this website which the word gets thrown around a lot, right? Like, oh, go do 150 problems on lead code, and once you've done that, you're basically prepared for any sort of interview problems, which is largely true. But it's also not the only way to prepare, right? So anecdotally, I will tell you that these are my lead code stats. Right? And if you can't see properly, I mean, they're meant to be these little bars, and this is from 2018 to 2021. There's little bars of like how much problems I've solved or submitted to during those years. This is a better picture, right? Even if you add all of that up, I don't think it adds up to 150. I think this is the highlights. So I did my first interview with Google. I think I had done like 20 problems back then. Same with Microsoft next year. That year I did 20 problems. And this is not to say that, oh, you don't need to do lead code and you can ace through interviews. This is more to say that there's a lot of work that went into, that's like hidden behind the scenes. Right? So lead code is great for structured problems, but if you go to these competitive programming events, the kind of events that I was going to when getting absolutely destroyed every single time, soul crushed, those problems are very, very hard, and that's all I had exposure to. So I used to go to all these events, and I highly encourage every single one of you to do that as well. And they prepared me for interviews, basically, right? So I would argue that they prepare you a lot better. And lead code's good for like brushing up, maybe like a week before interview. You can sort of go through different data structures and algorithms and sort by category and practice a bunch of problems. But really, the kind of skill set you want to build is not that, oh, I know that this is like a DP problem and I want to go solve that, or I'm going to practice for DP. You kind of want to be exposed to not knowing the category of problems and just be given like a general story of like, oh, here's some input and here's some output. How do you write something to build a program for that? That's kind of how you want to approach problem solving. At least that's what my suggestion is, that's what I used to do a lot. Then the next category is if you want to get a job at startup. I think if you do want to get a job at a startup, then I would care less about competitive programming. I don't want to, it's not a propaganda. I don't want to tell you that this is great and this is a CPC event and you should all be doing competitive programming. If you want to get a job at startup, it's the tech stack starts to matter a lot. And this is based on my experience with a lot of people who I'm friends with and who are starting a lot of companies, venture-backed startups as well. And tech stack matters because there's a difference. There's a difference in psychology of like how different companies hire, right? So big tech doesn't care about junior employees. They don't care about you at all. What they care about is mid-level engineers, but mid-level engineers are harder to hire for, and there's a limited number, right? So you kind of want to hire junior employees and train them to be mid-level engineers. That's kind of like the mindset. So what they're looking for, what big tech is looking for, is we're just going to hire very, very smart people, and then we'll train them on the job of what they need to know, right? So by the time they're mid-level engineers, we've kind of shaped them into what we want to do. So they don't really care about what programming languages you know, what frameworks you know. They have absolutely no desire for you to know or excel in any one of those things, right? So they care about whether you're smart, and the way they test for that is through algorithms and data structures and interviews. Startups are very different. They don't have a lot of runway. They don't have a lot of money to keep going for the next 5, 10, 100 years, as a lot of big tech does. So the startups care for what can you do now? What problems can you solve today? Are you familiar with AWS? Are you a good cloud engineer? Do you know React, or do you know some other obscure framework that they're using for their particular startup or product, right? So that's what I would focus on. Focus on building and shipping a lot of things. That's what you should do. Research is another interesting option. Again, if you're going to do research, I wouldn't really recommend focusing on competitive programming all that much. I mean, competitive programming, I think, is a good skill to have. It makes you generally better or good problem solver. So I wouldn't say don't do it entirely. But for research, you want to focus on, okay, well, I need to get into a good PhD programs, because you kind of do need a PhD. And how do you get into good PhD programs? Well, you need prior research experience, which is very silly, because as a PhD student, you're supposed to learn how to research, not do the best research of your life. But to learn how to do research, they're required to have done research before, which is a little bit silly to me. But for that, you basically need to be good academically. So make sure you have good GPA. Start working with your professors, your lecturers, and start doing research projects with them. Maybe do an honors year and try to publish something. And basically, your pathway to a PhD program is if you can convince. So there's no standardized recipe like it is for big tech. Like you can grind lead code and get into big tech. So for PhD programs, you basically need to convince someone that I would be a good student, and can you take me on as your advisee, right? And for that, you need either to directly work with them if you're fortunate enough, or work with someone who can then refer you or give you a list of recommendations. So that's what you want to optimize for if you do want to go down this path. And there's entrepreneurship. I haven't cracked this at all. I have just general vague things to say about it, which is you could treat it as a numbers game. So basically try out into different things, try to push and ship. A lot of shipping is very important. Make sure to not just do ASCII games in a terminal or like get a project. Make sure to rent like a $4 per month DigitalOcean droplet and host your project so people can see, people can use. And if you're solving a real problem, and if you've solved 100 of them, maybe one of them will actually be big enough that it will start to take off. I don't know. It's my hypothesis. The other way to do it is actually you go out and be an entrepreneur. So you want to be an entrepreneur. And you go speak to a bunch of people, try to identify their problems and see if you can convince them to pay you to do it. It's harder to sell, because why should you be the person as an undergraduate student to do it? I don't know, but I do think it's the honorable path. I think convincing someone to pay you money for solving a problem for them is extremely, extremely difficult. So if you want to work on something super challenging, startup's probably the way to go. I do recommend it. I think there's no bigger glory than doing a startup. So yeah, worth considering. So let's go back to the previous questions. We talked about a few different things, right? So what you can do in life. Let's talk about how do you decide what you should do, right? It's hard because you probably don't know. You don't have a lot of experience. I don't have a lot of experience, and that's okay. And one of the things I tell myself is life mortality in Australia is like, I think, 81 for men, 85 for women. And you guys, I mean, we haven't lived like 1/4 of our life, right? So we don't have to have everything figured out right now. That's okay. I mean, the way, one of the examples someone gave me was, it's very interesting that if you speak to someone who's like in their 70s and they've had like a 50-year-long career, you don't ask them, oh, have you worked for like 50 years or 54 years? Like, you don't really, it doesn't matter, right? So if you take those extra 3-4 years, you don't have to be working at 21, 22, have everything figured out. You can take those extra 3-4 years, maybe another 10 years, and that's still okay. Like, you're still not even halfway through your life. So it's all fine, it's all good. There's only one thing. I mean, it's just be true to yourself. Just know thyself, right? Figure out what is it that you want to optimize for in life. Is it money? Is it prestige? Is it power, challenge, something else? And I can talk a little bit about some of these things, and I would love to get your opinion as well. But these are the things you should really be thinking about, and then that will sort of inform you what you want to do in life, right? So the first one is money. Obviously, you do want money. Everyone wants money. It's a survival thing. You do want money. But I mean, it's well known that money has like diminishing returns after a certain point. So if you have enough for food, shelter, maybe a little bit extra for like holidays and things, beyond that, it really doesn't matter. Like if you have 10 million or 15 million, it makes virtually no difference in your quality of life. So the way I would like to think of money, or the way I like to think of money, is more like a constraint. So if you're trying to optimize for something in life, there are variables you're trying to optimize for, and then there are constraints around them. Money should really be constraint, not something you optimize for. That's my suggestion anyway. There's prestige. So do you want to work for Google just so you can say you work for Google and impress people? Is that the idea? And if it is, just be true to yourself about that, right? But generally, it's a trap. It's a trap for the same reasons as why owning luxury brands is a trap, right? Like, sure, maybe you can fool some people who don't know any better, and they'll think highly of you. But generally, it doesn't really increase the quality of your life. So prestige, I mean, it correlates with a lot of other things that you might care about, but don't actively try to optimize your prestige is what I would suggest. I know there's this culture, I know this because I have a younger brother who's at university, so I kind of hear about people through him. I know there's a culture going around that if you haven't made it to Dean Street, Google, some of these big tech or fintech companies, that you haven't made it in life. And that's objectively not true, right? You shouldn't be thinking about these things, you shouldn't be trying to optimize for them. In fact, if you do a startup, and if you're not even doing anything, to me, that's more honorable parts. If you need social validation, if you want to go into big tech or fintech just so you can get social validation, just come to me, I'll give you social validation regardless. So don't try to optimize for prestige and get a job, right? Then there's power, right? So do you want to be somebody? Do you want to do something, make impact, all those big words? And it's good because you get to say, oh, I did this thing, like, oh, I started the competitive programming club, or all of these things, me. And it feels good to be able to say those things. I think power is good if you can wield it. The problem is when you're young, power is generally, if someone's handing you power, if someone's like, oh, do this thing and I'll give you power, like, oh, I'll give you this job and you'll be in a position of authority, blah, blah, blah. When you're young, that's generally borrowed power. It's not really yours. So you're sort of like learning this power to sort of exercise it in a way that you don't really get to decide. And it's just not fun, right? I mean, I think the exception to this, again, is probably doing a startup, because then you can kind of organically grow it. But if someone's trying to offer you power, they're probably trying to trick you in some way to try to give you less compensation in exchange for power or something else. So maybe don't try to optimize for that either. Something else. Could be anything, right? Maybe you're just trying to survive, which is fair enough. I mean, another important thing is, how do you future-proof yourself, right? Because if you think that you can have a career as an engineer and be able to code for the next 50 years, you're grossly mistaken, right? And I'm sure everyone here now uses like Claude or ChatGPT to code to some degree, right? And these models are getting better and better. I learned programming before Claude and ChatGPT era, and you guys will never know what that's like. So I mean, these models are here. They're already getting better and better. It's not so hard to. I mean, it's already the case that one person can just do the job of a lot more. You just need to be informed enough to know high-level things, that you know how to write or read code. You don't understand a particular framework, you can just prompt these models and they can do a lot of the heavy lifting. That doesn't mean that it's replaced humans quite yet, but that does mean that previously what it would take a team of 10, maybe now takes a team of 3, right? So the job market going forward, I don't really know. And it's a scary thing. So you do want to think about how do you future-proof yourself. Maybe it's fine now. Maybe you can get a job. Maybe you get a job at a very fancy place and work for 5-10 years, and that's enough money for you to retire, and you can invest and live off of dividends, blah, blah, blah. And that's okay, but do think about those things though. Do think about, what is my exit strategy? If your strategy is that, oh, I got a job and now no one's kicking me out of here, or I will never be made redundant, I think you're mistaken. So do think about that as well. Not to scare you, but these things are scary. Just think about, what are your motivations for wanting to do what you want to do, and what's the path to get there. I think for me, I still haven't figured it out, but I have some opinions. I'm an opinionated person, and I think just to tie it back into competitive programming and why this is a great thing is because it gives you, the way I would look, I mean, you can do it for fun. That's part of it, right? Like select sport, why would you play hockey, soccer, whatever? Because it's fun. You can totally do that. But if you're trying to be a little bit strategic about it, I think it still makes a lot of sense to do it because it gives you a suite of tools at your disposal. So like, for example, I think in my slide there was like a logo of NVIDIA as well. So like earlier this year, this is my final year of PhD, by the way. So earlier this year, I was applying for internships because I'm going to graduate at the end of this year, so I'll just do one. And I was interviewing with NVIDIA and Amazon and all these other companies with very little preparation, but I still got an offer from NVIDIA because I've done a bunch of competitive programming before from undergrad. So I look at a problem, and a lot of it is now just about recall, and you'll realize this as well. So a lot of the problems and interviews that you end up coming, it's not so much about how smart or how smart you are if you're a genius. It's almost always about where have I seen this problem before and how did I solve it back then. So it's a lot about recall and pattern matching. So if I was doing an NVIDIA problem, I saw the problem, I was like, oh, this is, it's just topological sort. I just need to construct a graph, do topological sorting, that's the answer right there, right? So that just came naturally to me, but it's not that, oh, I'm a genius or whatever, it's just because I've been exposed to those kinds of problems through competitive programming. So I do recommend the league. I think it's a great idea. I wish I had that. So if there's one thing that I've realized is, if there are people at your university who are older than you who have done something you want to do, that makes your path to get there a lot easier, right? So if there are people who are willing to organize workshops to teach you about certain kinds of problems, that's just going to make your life easier because you don't have to discover them from scratch by yourself. So I do recommend doing that, but I don't want to, I think it's been long enough, but I don't want to necessarily turn it into a philosophy class. It's okay to just want one or more of the book before. Just figure it out. You don't have to tell anyone. If you want money and be greedy, just don't tell us all about it, but you do need to know for yourself if this is something you want, and once you know that, you can try to figure out a way to optimize for it. And that's probably all I have to say.